Lovely. So thanks, Christian. I'm going to share my screen now. Hold on. Okay. Can you see the slides?
Yep.
Lovely. All right. So yeah, welcome to everybody to this third session about API. So yeah, my name is Michele Pazin. I'm the head of Data Architecture and Insights. I look after the API a lot. And today I'll be talking a bit more about the Google Sheets API add-on. Right, so let me see, present. So I have a couple of slides just to sum up what we've been doing last week, very briefly. And then I have some slides essentially describing what the Dimensions API add-on for Google Sheets is. And then I'll try and give you a live demo how to install the add-on and the things you can do with it. Right, so last week I think we went over a few of the most common use cases for the Dimensions API, which in a very broad sense are three. You may have some complex queries that are hard to do with the web app, so you want to write the queries down using a programmatic format. You may want to automate, essentially running the same query over and over every day, every week, every month, because you need to monitor, for example, a research area, or you're trying to build a dashboard using dimensions data, or you simply want to get a lot of data out of dimensions. And the API is really handy for that because you can slice and dice the data in so many different ways that allow you to pull hundreds of thousands of records pretty easily, really. So last week we spent some time on the dimension search language, which is the main, the language used to pull data from dimensions. Is something we built ourselves. It's based around a pretty simple syntax, very similar to the English language, whereby you specify the object you want and some filters. So it's a very similar to SQL for those of you who have some experience with relational databases. The documentation online at that URL is very, very rich and it's always up to date. So if you want to find out more about the dimension search language, please take a look at that. Finally, we also went over the main ways to access the API. So probably the easiest one, and the one you may be familiar with already, is via the Dimensions web app. So if the API is enabled, you can go to the Dimensions API page where there is a search box. And you can use that search box to put in any API query, and you would see the results in the JSON format, which is the default format we use for the API. So you'll see these results appearing at the bottom. Of course, this is probably not a very efficient way of doing some work with the API because you're limited by the fact you have to copy paste things in there, and the JSON's results are not necessarily the best formats you want to work with. So there's different ways to essentially interact with the API. You may be using a third-party software such as Tableau, Qlik, or others. So software that know how to interact with APIs in general, and then they know how to transform JSON into some other data representation. It could be a chart, it could be a table, it could be something else. And then obviously, probably the most efficient way of working with APIs is by using a programming language like Python, R, Java, and so on. And last week I showed you the Dinkley library, which is a Python extension for the API that simplifies a lot of operations, such as logging in and logging out and pulling and paginating through queries, and many, many others. Right, now we're really have to say that we've added a new way of working with the API, which is a Google Sheets plugin. In a nutshell, a Google Sheets plugin is an add-on for Google Sheets that allows you to interact with the API. So it's very similar to what you would use with something like Tableau or Qlik, these third-party softwares out there. Insofar as you can connect to the API, you can authenticate, you can query the API, but then the data will come straight into Google Sheets. So of course, for this to happen, you need to have a Google account. Google Sheets, they require you to have a Google account. The API plugin, though, is free. You can simply install it from the Google Suite Marketplace. or directly from the add-ons menu if you've done that already. And as I mentioned, you can query the API and then pull the data into Google Sheets. And the reason why you want to do that is because Google Sheets have so much more to offer when it comes to manipulating the data. You can build charts, you can build pivot tables, you can easily count the objects coming back, and you can do that using a product that you may be familiar with already. We know that many analysts that are much more comfortable, for example, with Sheets, Excel spreadsheets or Google Sheets, as opposed to a programming language. So how does it work? So the basic operations are logging in. So once you get the add-on, you essentially have to put in your credentials. Your credentials are safely stored in your browser, so they won't be shared with anybody else. And then a panel opens up on the right-hand side that allows you to put in some DSL queries, some dimensional search language query. The results coming back, as usual, they are JSON results, so that they are presented using this data format, but the plugin essentially transforms those results into columns and rows for you automatically. And there's also other features I will be showing you in a minute. For example, a pagination slider that allows you to pull more than 1,000 results for a single query, and other things as well. Right, so the live demo is broken up into two parts. First, I'll show you, essentially, I walk through the steps of finding the plugin, installing it, and then using it. And then the second part, I will show you an example real-world application of this plugin. And I'll open up essentially a sheet containing data about COVID-19, which is the same data we have been making available over the past few weeks. And then I'll show you how to process the data further. So what can be done once you have the data in Google Sheets. And I will say right away that I'm actually not so good with Google Sheets. It's not really my platform of reference in general. So I've been asking for help in doing this exercise, and my colleague Bo Alvaro, some of you may know him. He's been really kind in helping me out processing the data, and I think he's done a really great job. So I'm really looking forward to showing you this. And by the way, the slides will be shared at the end of the presentation, and the Google Sheets as well. I'm going to show is freely available online, so you can take a look yourself and possibly change it and extend it. Right. So before going to future work, then I'll show you how to get the plugin. So very first thing, I'm going to look for the Google G Suite store, which is a little bit like the Apple Store for Google. So if you go to the Google G Suite, you can find, actually that is not the right place, it's the G Suite Marketplace. G Suite Marketplace. So this is kind of the online store where you can find lots of Google related applications. So once I'm here, I'll just type in dimensions. You can see the Dimensions API app plugin comes up at the top. You just click on it. There's some information about the plugin here, and you will simply click install. Of course, you need to be logged in order to do this. As I mentioned, you need to have a Google account, and you need to approve the add-on. Here are just details about the things the add-on requires in order to run. And of course, it needs to be able to edit your spreadsheets, because we're essentially pulling data from Dimensions into your personal spreadsheets. And it needs to connect an external service, which is the Dimensions API. And finally, it needs to display and run third-party web content in prompts. That essentially means it needs to modify your Google Sheets look and feel. We're building a panel where you can write some queries and preview the results. So I'm going to click allow, and the plugin will install right away. That's it. So that's done. So now, in order to see the plugin, I'm going to have to create a new Google Sheet. All right, so we're gonna give this Google Sheet a name. And now if you look at the add-ons menu, as you can see, there is a new menu item that says Dimensions API, and that's essentially the plugin we just installed. So now I'm going to click on Run Queries, and I was previously logged in, so I'm going to log out just to show you how to log in. Right, so the very first time you open this up, you will see a login panel just like this. So as you probably have guessed, I have some demo credentials just for today. I'm going to place the credentials in here. And keep in mind, this operation needs to be done only once because your login credentials will be stored within your browser. So if you're not on a shared computer, you just essentially let it happen and you don't have to worry about logging in anymore. And now the plugin is fully loaded and I can essentially start launching queries. I will briefly walk you through the different menu items we have here. So the query panel is where you would put in your queries. Under examples, we have added a bunch of essentially examples for the main content types available in Dimensions. And if you haven't used the API before, it's probably useful to point out that via the API, you can search for researchers directly as well, which is something that you cannot do on the Dimensions web app yet. Of course, there are researchers listed out in the Dimensions web app, but you cannot search for researchers directly. So for example, if I click on researchers here, there's a bunch of simple researchers queries you may want to try out. And then finally, in the history panel, there will be a list of the queries you have run recently. So I'm going to start here by picking up a researchers query, and let's see. Right. So in this case, I'm searching for researchers, well, young researchers. The first publication here is 2018, and the research organization is represented by this grid identifier. I don't remember what that grid ID stands for, but we can look at that in a minute. And I'm returning 100 researchers. So I'm going to hit run, and in this case, there is only 10 of them. As you can see, all the data come through in a tabular format. Some of the fields, they contain some structured data because that's how the data is actually organized originally. And that's essentially because in research orgs for researchers, there is a complete list of all the organizations this researcher has been affiliated with. So it is a structured field that needs to be broken down further via a separate step. So if now I relax the query filters by eliminating that first publication here, and I'm just pulling out researchers from this grid identifier, and I hit 1000. In this case, well, there's only 729. So not very many researchers linked to this organization. So by the way, let's find out what is this organization. So in this case, I'm gonna have a query on organizations and say search organizations where ID equal, I'm gonna put in that grid ID, return organizations, all the metadata available. And that's something in Haken, Germany. Oh, Fraunhofer Institute for Laser Technology. So it's actually a sub-organization of a larger institute. But now let's pick a query that returns more results. So for example, we can search for publications. So we could search for publications mentioning the keyword graphene that have been cited more than, say, 100 times. And in this case, I want to return publications. let me see, I'm going to return all the metadata for publications, and I'm going to get 500 of them. As you may have noticed, the first row in the data coming back contains always the query you have created in case you want to copy it or save it for later. And in this case, as you can see, there's a whole lot of stuff coming back because I use the all keyword, returning publications. And so there's lots of data that can be used for further analysis. The nice thing about Google Sheets, as I mentioned, is the fact that you can rely on other functionalities available in Google Sheets. So for example, in this case, I could take one column, the journal title, if I find it, journal title here, and let's say I want to look at the distribution, the frequency of certain journal titles. So even for me, I'm not a very good spreadsheets user. It's super simple to click on Explore, for example, here, and get some suggestions from Google Sheets as to what analysis, what kind of further exploration of the data you want to perform. And you can easily pull things into Sheets. And in this case, I have a pie chart showing me the most frequent journals resulting from this query. You could even combine columns together and build charts based on that. I think I can probably spend weeks studying the many different possibilities Google Sheets make available. I'm actually pretty certain that many of you are already quite good with it, and that's the reason why we decided to develop this this plugin. So a couple other things I wanted to show you here. Oh, as I mentioned, history, that contains the history of all the queries I've just done. If you click on Open New Sheets, that obviously creates a brand new sheet with your results. In this case, I'm returning the years. I'm faceting on years. So these are the most frequent years related to that query, and that was created in a brand new sheet. The other nice thing you can do is paginate through the results automatically, right? So if you have never used the DSL language, you may not know that there's a limit to the number of records you can pull out from a single query, and that limit is 1,000. So for example, if now I say limit 2,000, the system will comply. Say there's an error. Actually, the error is a different one here. I put in publication instead of publications. So if I hit run now, it will say, yeah, limit 2,000 exceeds maximum allowed 1,000. So the way to circumvent this limitation is to paginate the query. So you can say skip 1,000 and skip 2,000, skip 3,000, and that essentially will allow you to go through a larger data set in chunks. So of course, if you want to do this for 30, 40,000 records, it becomes really tedious because you have to do many different queries, and that's what this extra feature does automatically for you. It's called auto pagination, and essentially you don't have to specify any limit or skip operation. You simply have to say how many times, how many pages of this query you want to pull out. So in this case, if I say 10 or 11, say 10, that will pull 10,000 records for this query, and it will open those up into a new sheet. As you can see, there is an ETC right next to the pagination control that tells me that they can take 30 to 50 seconds. That's a very conservative estimate. In many cases, it will take less time, but of course, this is because in the background, the system is launching one query per page. And as you may know, the analytics API allows one query every 2 seconds maximum. So we have to paste the queries at a certain speed. And also there may be some connectivity delays that can vary a lot depending on where you're running the sheet from. So we just thought it was very important to let people know that, once you use this slider, you may have to wait a little bit in order to get the results. So let's see how long this is gonna take, and we'll see coming back 10,000 results for this query. Okay, that was much quicker than I thought, actually. So now the results are rendering. All right. And as you can see here, we have 10,000 rows, a bit more than 10,000. And yeah, so this is a really easy way, I would say, to pull potentially lots of data directly into a spreadsheet and then analyze it further. So I would say I've covered everything I had to say about the Google Sheets plugin. I should mention that there is a new page in the Dimensions API documentation specifically about the Google Sheets add-on, where you will find information and descriptions about the features, or the new features we'll be adding in the future. So the next thing I wanted to show you is a kind of application. I can see there's a couple of comments maybe. If you paginate, could the data conceivably change out from under the query between pages, resulting in dupes or missing data due to updates while you are working? Change out from under the query. So there's a question from Wade. She's asking if the data could change while you're paginating in the context of a single query. I think there is a.
Is that the question is meant when, I guess, when we update the system and the query is running exactly at that point in time?
Yeah, I think in principle, yes, that could potentially happen. But we tend to run our updates at a specific point in time every day. I don't know exactly when, but I believe it's pretty early in the morning.
Yep.
So yeah, potentially yes. Potentially yes.
If you want to reproduce that error, then you need to basically do a lot of queries around 6 to 7 a.m. in Europe. Then you have a chance.
Yeah. To be honest, it's an issue that has never come up as far as I remember. People saying, oh, I pulled some data at that time and then I realized the data changed. But yes, in principle, that could happen, yes. But I wouldn't say it's a big deal in general. Right, so I was going to show you the specific application of made using the Google Sheets plugin. So the query here, I don't know if you know already, but the Dimensions team has been making available all sorts of documents related to COVID-19 since 2 or 3 weeks ago at least, and that's available on COVID-19 dimensions.ai in the form of a kind of a subset of dimensions data you can see in here, but it's also available as a spreadsheet that people can navigate online. You'll find links to it if you go to the Dimensions website, but essentially the spreadsheet uses this query to retrieve publications. So yesterday I've essentially ran this query. We can do it again together if you like, using the API plugin, and these are the results you get back. And let me see how many. I kind of forgot. There's around 8,000, I believe, more. There's like nearly 9,000 publications matching this this query. So the next step was I wanted to essentially do some analysis, some statistical analysis of the data, simply using Google Sheets. And as I mentioned, I'm pretty crap with Google Sheets. I had to ask for my, friend Bo to help me out. But I was so impressed by the amount of stuff he was able to do quickly. And I know many other people who are actually very proficient with Google Sheets. And this is essentially simply by using count operations or group by operations that Google Sheets make available. So here there's statistics about number of publications, publications with DOIs, with journal information, and so on. How many publications per month we have, statistics about the journals, essentially the top that journals by number of publications, statistics about the publishers, top publishers, um, statistics for publication types, uh, number of citations, um, number of citations segmented using brackets, um, all metric statistics, statistics about open access, and all of this is being done. Of course, there are queries you can run with the API to get this data right away by using faceting. But this is just an example, I think, a powerful example of the kind of things you can do simply by using Google Sheets. And once you have these tables, building some simple charts representing the data is also that simple using Google Sheets. And so as you can probably imagine, this is in a nutshell. I would say I would consider this the beginning of a dashboard. You can put together a dashboard based on a query on a data set you pull from the DSL. The other thing we are currently looking at, there's a functionality in Google Sheets called triggers that allow essentially to run a cell, to run a query at regular times. You can set to run it every day, every week, whatever. So a Sheets powered dashboard like this could be also always up to date. You can set it up to be always up to date. And I think that's a really cool thing about Google Sheets and the possibilities of this plugin. All right, so I just wanted to say a few more things about what we're working on now, or what we plan to release in the near future when it comes to the Google Sheets plugin. So we've been looking at query placeholders. So at the moment, you can simply run a query and get the results back into your sheet. But what if you already have a sheet full of DOIs or PubMed IDs or ORCID IDs for researchers, and essentially you want to seed your query based on those data? So by using query placeholders, you'll be able to say, for example, search publications using the DOIs I already have in my sheet, and essentially save all the data in a new sheet. Yeah, and that gives you a way to essentially put into play data you already have. The next thing we're looking at is unpacking nested fields. As you have seen earlier, there are things like authors or affiliations that simply by the nature, because of the nature of the data we have, are nested. So the one publication can have many authors and many affiliations. So those, they come through with a kind of JSON structure where you have multiple authors per cell. And that's not really nice to work with in Google Sheets terms. So an expert Google Sheet user would know how to unpack this data using regular expressions, or maybe some simple function you can create within Google Sheets. But we would like to make it even simpler for people to work with this data. So we're looking at ways to essentially unpack or drill down into these fields, and then instead of having one row per publication, you would have one row per author or per affiliation. And finally, this is a new product for us, so we'd love to hear from you guys. Yeah, please let us know what are the features you like the most, or what are the things you would expect to have but are not there, and we'll be very interested in starting a conversation to see how we can make it happen. I see there's another question coming through from Rita. In Sheets, the maximum number of record return is 30,000. Is it possible to access more than the number with limit and skip? Yeah, that's a very good point. I should have mentioned. So 50,000, that's the maximum you can pull using the API, using limit and skip. We allow 30,000 in this first release of the Sheets plugin, simply because you weren't too sure about the performance aspects of this. In particular, Google Sheets, in some cases, depending on how much data you pull back, it can take a long time to process the data and render it within a tabular format. So we needed to essentially have a bit more experience with the product, and also by giving it to real users before essentially allowing you to pull up to 50,000. So the short answer is we hope to be able to let you pull 50,000 results at some point in the future. I think there's another comment here about the dashboard concept. Yeah, Excel and Power BI. Yeah, you're not the first person who mentioned Excel, and that's something else we are considering. We're also, aware of the fact that a lot of, some customers do not have access to Google products, especially in the working environment, so they would rather have an Excel plugin. Now, there are some difficulties in doing the Excel plugin. Well, the main thing is that it will be, it has to be developed in a different language. It can certainly be done. So at the moment, we're fundamentally listening to you guys and see how much appetite there is for something like this. So we do not exclude it. We might be doing it in the future, but for the moment, we just have to see what happens and see how many people, essentially start using this new feature. And that's all. As usual, that's the support API email address you may want to use to ask us questions. And please sign up with our users forum for updates and announcements. And if there are other questions, I'll be very happy to take them. Where will this recording be accessible? I believe Christian will be sending out an email, right?
Yeah, and the email which comes on Monday with the new topics, we will also make that recording available. So, if you are not yet, if you didn't receive an email this Monday, send me an email or put your email address here in the chat so that I can add you. It will contain the recording, the slides, the topics for the next week, and the same Zoom link will be visible. Good. I got your email address. Done.
Any more questions or comments or ideas for further developments? Okay. Well, then I suppose we're doing great.
Michele, there was one question I just noticed from Rita. Can you say more about the automated queries that run at particular times?
All right. Yeah. So that's something that we is not officially supported yet. We've been playing with it, and I'll just show you exactly what this is. And trigger. Sorry, that's another kind of trigger. And here we go. I think. No, this is not really what I wanted to have. But I think. So say if in a sheet you have a command. Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned as well. Let me open up a brand new. The query panel, that's one way to launch queries, but there is also a command you can use. So if I say equal dimensions search publications return publications limit 100, hopefully this is going to work. I think I forgot the syntax. Apologies for that. I'll make sure that that will be added to the dimensions to the slides. But essentially, there's a way to run the same query directly from a cell, right? And so that will be the starting point for triggers. So triggers is a functionality, and I think that can be started from script editor is one place where you can start them from. Essentially, if you here, you can define your own functions or your own script. But the thing I wanted to show you is this clock icon there. First, I have to save my project here. So if you click on the, oh, still saving. All right. So I think, yeah, all right. So from within here, any user can essentially create new triggers where you can specify a function you want to run at specific points in time. Yeah. So you can decide to run the function every time the spreadsheet open. You can essentially set it at a specific point in time or periodically, and that function will essentially run every time. So that will be a way to keep your spreadsheet up to date all the time. You can also get notifications if something goes wrong. And that's essentially how triggers work. So they're actually that simple to set up. What we're looking into now is whether we can essentially have you let you skip this step of setting up your own function. That would be the main way to generate a trigger. So within my functions, you would have to say something like dimensions, your query, and then say where to save the results. So it takes a little bit of knowledge of the Google Apps Script, which is the language used by Google for these functions. But I actually believe there is a way to trigger something simply by storing it in a cell. So if you store your command in a cell, you should be able to then say, run this command every week at this specific point in time. And yeah, do apologize if the answer is not too complete, but as I mentioned, that's something we're actually looking into at the moment. Good.
Great. Then if there are no other questions, we have a couple of more minutes, but we don't want to keep you. I actually think this is a really great plugin because it also allows a failed medical doctor like myself to work with the data. So thanks, Michele, for walking us through it. And yeah, as usual, I will be sending out on Monday the email with the topics of the week, and hope to see you then here. If you have colleagues, please invite them by passing the Zoom link along. Looking forward to see you here next Tuesday.
Yeah, thanks to everybody for the attention.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.